Crimson Desert just revealed its official PC requirements, and oh boy, they're kind of brutal. To play the game at 1440p 60 FPS high settings, the developers recommend a RTX 4070 or RX 7700 XT. But once you actually analyze the spec sheet, something interesting appears. This game seems to be designed around upscaling, frame generation, and 12GB GPUs. So let's break down what that actually means. Let's start with the recommended specs. To run Crimson Desert at 1080p 60 FPS, the developers recommend the RTX 2080 or the Radeon 6700 XT. That's already quite demanding for 1080p, right? To put it into context, here's how it compares with some of the modern AAA games targeting 1080p 60 FPS. Dragon Age: The Veilguard had RTX 2070. Assassin's Creed Shadows had RTX 3060 Ti. Monster Hunter Wilds RTX 2060 Super. And now Crimson Desert has RTX 2080. Now interestingly, the RTX 3060 Ti is actually slightly faster than the 2080, and it's even closer to the 2080 Super in many games. So in practice, those GPUs are roughly the same performance class, which means Crimson Desert isn't widely out of line here, but it still sits towards the heavier end of the modern AAA requirements. Things get even more interesting when you look at the high presets. For 1440p 60 FPS high settings, the requirements jump to NVIDIA RTX 4070 and the Radeon RX 7700 XT. That's roughly 50% more GPU performance than a 3060 Ti class card, which means mid-range GPUs, especially laptop GPUs, will likely struggle to hit 1440p 60 FPS natively. In other words, upscaling technologies like DLSS and FSR will probably be required. But here's something even more interesting. Going from 1440p high to 4K Ultra only increases the requirement from roughly an RTX 4070 to a 5070 Ti class GPU. Normally, that jump should be much larger because 4K renders more than twice as many pixels as 1440p, so you'd normally expect almost double the GPU power. But the spec sheet doesn't show that, which suggests something very important. The difference between these presets may not just be raw GPU compute, it may actually be VRAM capacity and memory bandwidth. And this becomes especially important for laptop gamers. I'm currently using the Asus TUF F16 with the RTX 5060, and compared to a desktop 4070, this laptop GPU typically lands around 2 performance tiers lower. So realistically, we're probably looking at something like this. So for laptops, 1080p high will likely be the realistic target. Now, if we compare the RTX 3060 and the 4050, that is 6GB laptop GPUs, in many Raster benchmarks, the RTX 3060 laptop is actually slightly faster than the newer RTX 4060. The main reason is the 192-bit bus memory on the 3060 compared to the 96-bit bus on the 4050. However, the 4050 does have one big advantage: DLSS frame generation. So while the 3060 may deliver slightly better native performance, the 4050 can use frame generation to make gameplay appear smoother. And another interesting pattern in the spec sheet is the VRAM configuration. RX 6700 XT 12GB VRAM, RTX 4070 12GB VRAM, RX 7700 XT 12GB VRAM. Every GPU listed for higher settings ships with 12GB of VRAM. That strongly suggests that the game was designed around 12GB GPUs, which could create pressure for cards with 8GB or 6GB of VRAM, especially at higher resolution. And there's one more small detail in the spec sheet that reinforces this idea. The developers constantly pair AMD and NVIDIA GPUs that have very similar VRAM capacity and memory bandwidth. Now you tell me in which world the RTX 4070 is equivalent to a 7700 XT. Actually, it is 15 to 20% faster, but both of them have 12GB of VRAM. So this usually indicates that the engine is optimized around a specific memory budget, not just raw shader performance, which again points towards memory capacity being a major factor for this game. So based on the official specs and the current GPU architecture, this is how laptop GPUs might stack up. S tier RTX 5090, 5080, 4090, 1440p ultra settings, native probably, and can also hit 4K with some DLSS and lower settings. A-tier 5070 Ti RTX 4080, 1440p high natively, and probably higher frame rates or even some kind of 4K with lower resolutions and DLSS. B-tier GPUs RTX 5070, 5060, 4070, 4060 and 5050, 1080p high, mostly native, except I have slight doubt on the 5050, but it should still be manageable if you lower the settings a bit. C tier, now this is the most widely used laptop GPUs, RTX 4050 and the 3060 mobile, 1080p, medium or high settings, mix match, 60 FPS you should be able to get. Then D tier, the RTX 3050 and the RTX 2060 mobile, 1080p, low medium settings with some DLSS, 60 FPS. The spec sheet also includes targets like handheld devices like the Xbox Ally family powered by AMD Z series handheld chips, the second generation. For those devices, the target is roughly 720p with frame generation reaching around 40 FPS, which suggests that the native rendered frame is likely much lower, around 20 or 23 FPS. Even next generation handhelds will rely heavily on upscaling and frame generation. Another detail worth mentioning is the install size. The game requires around 150 GB of storage on an SSD. That likely reflects the scale of the world and the amount of asset streaming happening in the background. So when you put all these clues together, a clear picture starts to appear. Crimson Desert seems to be designed around modern GPUs, 12 GB VRAM targets, reconstruction technologies like DLSS and FSR. And while older GPUs like the NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1060 are still listed as minimum requirements, the real experience clearly targets much newer hardware. If these specs hold up at launch, Crimson Desert could easily become one of the most demanding open world games we've seen in years. And I will be benchmarking it on the day of release. We'll try to release the video on that day itself. We'll see the RTX 5060 laptop as well as the Rogue Ally Extreme.